Hey guys, welcome back. It's Missy. A few weeks ago, we talked about helplessness. Helplessness is when you are taught to feel trapped in your circumstances and feel like you couldn't ask for help and you lack those problem-solving skills. Now we need to talk about the opposite problem, which is being too self-reliant. They're both bad. Being on the extreme of one or the other end is not healthy. And if I'm too independent and I don't need nobody was a face, you're looking at it. I definitely have struggled with being way too overly self-reliant and not even knowing when to ask for help. So this is a really important topic, one that I can really highly relate to, that I think really needs to be talked about. So being self-reliant, being able to depend on yourself is so important. But when it's done too much, it can lead to failed relationships. Not only can it lead to failed relationships, but it can lead to anxiety, depression, burnout, and unnecessary pain. So that's why it's important to be aware and to work on it. So let's break it down. Let's first go into, where does this come from? Where does the need to be overly self-reliant come from? First thing is childhood. When you were young, you felt like you couldn't rely on anyone. Maybe it was frowned upon. Maybe when you did try to rely on others, they showed they weren't trustworthy, they let you down, they betrayed you, they hurt you. So now you learned, like, okay, well, I can't trust my family, I can't trust my caregivers, I have to depend on myself. I'm the only one who's gonna take care of me. So now you've become too self-reliant. Or maybe you've had to be overly self-reliant because your parents weren't capable of taking care of you or your siblings. So you're like, okay, I guess I'm the parent now. I have to take care of myself and I have to take care of my siblings too. Or another thing is maybe you were forced to be self-reliant. You were told, like, hey, you gotta depend on yourself. Don't depend on anyone. No one's trustworthy. So you were told this over and over again. You now really believe that no one's trustworthy, you can't rely on anyone. So you're like, okay, I have to depend on myself. Another thing is you may have been burned or hurt too many times, and because of this, you're like, screw everyone else, no one else matters, I only got me. And then the last thing is you may have had to live in survival mode, and when you're in survival mode, you're at the basic needs, Maslow's hierarchy needs. You are in like the safety shelter mode. So when you're in that mode, you're not thinking about anyone else, you're thinking, okay, I need to have my needs met and I need to be the one that takes care of these things. So you will think only and solely about yourself and relying only on yourself because you felt like your environment, the people around you couldn't trust them. So knowing where it comes from, now we can talk about why you're too self-reliant. So one thing is pride. So you may be too prideful. And this is because ego is trying to protect you. Ego always thinks it knows better. You don't want to seem weak to others. So your ego puts those walls up thinking it's protecting you from being vulnerable or dealing with a potential threat. It gets covered with pride and acting like there's not an issue that you can't handle yourself. So you're too prideful to ask for help. It pains you to ask for help. That's like a sting at your ego every time you have to ask for help. It's a very vulnerable place to have to ask for help. So then you won't ask for help because of that pride. Another thing is control. It's a lot easier to take care of your own problems than giving it to someone else. That's a form of you controlling your situation or even trying to control your outcome. Another example of you trying to take control is that you can't accept no or rejection, and because of that, you're like, okay, I'm gonna try to control from anyone ever rejecting me or saying no, so I'll just do it myself. Another thing is you don't want to burden anyone else. You don't want to be a problem with anyone else. This could be a sign of like you being codependent, people pleasing, overly helping. Like you don't want to feel like a burden, so you won't even bother asking other people. You don't want to make anyone feel uncomfortable or feel like they have to help you, so you're like, you know what, I'm not gonna even ask for help, I'll just do it myself. I can definitely relate to that, of worrying about other people, feeling like a burden and not feeling like I could ask for help, or I wanted to bother people, felt like I was a bother, and just worrying so much about others. But in turn, you not taking that help or asking for that help affects your relationships negatively, and it hurts your ability to be authentic or be genuine or build that bond. Another thing is it makes you feel validated. I know this was really true for me. Like when I did things myself, I was like, yeah, I did that. I didn't ask anyone for help. I did that on my own. And it especially can turn into a codependent thing if you fantasize about how people perceive you or them giving you praise. So when it's getting to the point of you fantasizing or you overly praising yourself, that could be masked as insecurity. You overcompensating for something you don't genuinely feel. It can become addicting to you just doing things by yourself so that you gain that validation and you feel better about yourself. So being overly self-reliant could be a way to mask your insecurities. You are using it as a way to feel validated. And then the last reason is you are avoiding relationships. So you being too self-reliant, it keeps people away. It's a way for you to not have to deal with any sort of pain or have to be in any sort of relationship or have to rely on anyone. And like I said before, it prevents you from being vulnerable. So you being overly self-reliant, you don't have to deal with other people or relationships. This especially happens if you have avoidant insecure attachment and you use avoidance as a way to protect yourself from being vulnerable or getting hurt. So you're avoiding any type of deep connection with others by being overly self-reliant. My light just died. I hope that I'm not too dark. I'm trying to figure out this lighting thing. This YouTube thing is so difficult. I'm trying to figure out this lighting thing. So I'm really sorry if I'm dark or I'm pale. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. So bear with me. Now that we talked about where it comes from and why you're overly self-reliant, let's talk about how being overly self-reliant can affect you and why it could be negative. So when you don't ask help from others, it makes your life a lot harder. You may notice you're really burnt out. You may notice that you realize you need help and you don't ask for it. And so then you get stuck in this cycle of, oh, my life's so hard, I need a break, I need help, but I don't know how because I don't trust anyone and I can't rely on anyone. So you may notice your life's really difficult, but you don't think it's an option to ask for help. You push away the thoughts of asking for help, or you don't know how to ask for help. Or you are suffering mentally and you need help and you don't ask for help because you think I can do it myself, I don't need anyone. Another thing is, if you don't ask for help or you don't gain insight from others, you don't grow as a person. We as people, we need each other to help us grow and gain insight. We can't judge ourselves and see where exactly what's going on, what's wrong. We need people from the outside to be like, hey, I noticed you're doing this unhealthy behavior. Maybe this could help you. Or I noticed that maybe you need a little help in this area. You don't gain that insight because you don't ask for help. And you suffer in silence. So you're not able to grow as a person when you don't ask for help. Another thing is you may notice you're really defensive. If you are someone where you have an ego, especially about asking for help, you may notice you'll get really defensive. Like me personally, I had a really hard time asking for help because I thought that if I asked for help, they were judging me and they thought that I couldn't take it on. And I was like, I can take it on, like I don't need anybody. And I literally would be offended if someone asked me if I needed help. Like, what, you think I can't do it on my own? Like, that's how bad it was. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I still struggle a little bit with it, but I'm working on it. But you'll notice that you may get really defensive, and when anyone suggests that maybe you need help or they could be there for you because the ego's protecting you, you'll get defensive. I personally noticed that with ego, when you are someone that is very fragile and you have a bruised ego, what happens is you'll get really good at something, and then when someone maybe gives you constructive criticism or they offer you something that you don't want, you will notice yourself getting really defensive because in reality you're really insecure. You've put your all into this one thing and you don't have genuine confidence in yourself. So that's why you'll feel threatened and you'll get defensive. And then again, that hurts your relationships because if you're getting defensive at things when they're trying to be there for you, they're like, what the? Okay, like, okay, this is weird. How do I be a friend to you then? Which goes into the next point is it hurts your relationships. So you being overly self-reliant, you're not allowing other people to be there for you. You're not allowing a bond to build. You're not allowing any trust. And so because of that, like, there's no genuine connection. There's not a back and forth. You may notice maybe sometimes your relationships are one-sided because you don't know how to be vulnerable or ask for help or share things. And so because of that, your relationships will really suffer. And also, you take away that experience of other people feeling good, like, you know, that validation you get when you ask for help. You're taking away that experience of them feeling that joy of being there for you or being able to help you. As well as another thing, psychologically, when we ask someone for a favor and then they do that for us, that subconsciously makes them realize they like us because we only do something for someone we like. So you're also, you know, you're taking that away from you too. You're taking away from people subconsciously realizing they like you, which goes into loneliness. It's really lonely being overly self-reliant, overly independent. You lack those deep connections in your life because you're not opening up or you're not asking for that help, physical or emotionally. That is so lonely, feeling like you're in a world where everyone's out to get you, you're in survival, and you can only rely on yourself and you don't have anyone to trust. So it can be really lonely when you don't feel like you have anyone because you don't trust anyone, you don't really trust yourself, you don't really trust other people. And I know some people will say, but I do trust myself. But how can you really trust yourself if you don't trust yourself enough to know who you can trust? So of course that hurts, as maybe you don't feel like anyone really genuinely cares or they have your best interests. You may crave relationships, but every time you go into a relationship, you wind up hurt because you're not opening up and the other person, they can't take it. Especially in a romantic relationship, your partner wants to feel like they're an equal, they're adding something to it. And if they don't feel that way, then they're like, well, what's the use? What am I here for? I don't feel like an equal. I don't feel like I add value to you. And then they'll dip. Another thing is how it affects you is you may notice you're really controlling. So it's really hard for you to let control. It's really hard for you to delegate things to other people because you focus so much on things that are completely out of your control. And like I said before, you're trying to control maybe feeling hurt or pain. So you'll be really controlling. You'll try to control your relationships. You'll try to control things that are out of your control. And you may in turn think that you're controlling yourself, but really you most likely are trying to control the outcomes or how other people perceive you. You're trying to control the potential hurt you may endure. And it's because you don't realize the things that are in your control and you don't focus what's in your control. And the last thing, if you're overly self-reliant, it reinforces those negative things you heard. It reinforces that belief that you don't deserve relationships, and it reinforces that belief that you can't trust anyone, you can't rely on anyone, and you can only solely rely on yourself, which is an unhealthy belief. We as humans, we need each other. It's a basic need. We survived this long because we relied on each other. That's why it's become a need. Like if you were in a room by yourself, you would die. So you continuously relying on yourself is causing you to reinforce those negative beliefs. And also by you overly relying on yourself, when you get into relationships and then they leave, that reaffirms that belief that others will always just hurt you and you need to avoid them at all costs. So now that we went through all of that, how do we heal from this? How do we deal with it? Well, first thing is you need to change the wiring in your brain. You need to retrain your brain from those thoughts that you can only rely on yourself and no one else can ever help you. So you need to remind yourself like, hey, it's okay to ask for help and we all need each other. And it's a safe place to do that. Those are things that you want to reaffirm to retrain your brain. Because when you tell yourself those negative things, like I said, you're reaffirming it. So you need to reaffirm more safe language and nurturing language that reaffirms the opposite of what you've always been told or what you tell yourself. So rather than saying I can only trust myself or only I have me, you can change it to I trust myself enough to know who I can trust, who I can rely on. The next step is to actually ask for help and allow people to actually help. So if there's a time when someone's like, hey, you need help with this, let them. Say, you know what? Yeah, I could use a little hand. You want to get comfortable and take baby steps, even if it means like asking someone to go get you a paper towel, if like that's how bad you are with not being able to ask for help. Or maybe it's calling someone, asking their advice or their insight into something. Start with baby steps, challenge yourself. If someone's offering the help, take it. If there's an opportunity where you can ask for help, do it. That's what's important with checking in with yourself and like recognizing when you're overly burnt out. That's when you know you need to ask for help. So practice it, whether it means you practice it once a week or daily. Challenge yourself to be able to ask for that help. And I mean allowing help from others, of people that you genuinely trust, not just anyone, but really learning how to trust yourself and realizing the people that you do feel comfortable with and you know that you can trust them, but you've been afraid to take that next step. So you want to feel like it's a safe place that you can do that, and really trusting in yourself and knowing who's the people that you do want to trust and who's the people that you do want to ask this help from. The next thing is to heal that bruised ego. So if you are someone where you get an ego boost every time you're overly self-reliant, or you get really defensive when other people try to offer you that help, you really need to check yourself and you really need to work on recognizing when you get defensive when people ask for help and realizing they actually have true intentions and it's not a reflection on your ability to do it. And recognize when you're overly hyping yourself up to the point where it feels like you're overcompensating. That's just masking your true healing and being egotistical about being self-reliant, or even anything that maybe you're being egotistical about. Because if you're someone who you're egotistical about, it means you praise yourself so much that you then become really defensive about it. And it can get to the point where you can't handle if anyone says anything negative to you. If you can't handle constructive criticism or when someone is offering you help, it means you're overly insecure about something. And so when that happens, ego comes in and tries to protect you. So you need to work on healing that part of your ego, where basically that's where reparenting and validation comes from, where you're like, hey, you know, I did a good job and that's okay, and leaving it at that, and saying like, I love you, I'm proud of you, but not overly doing it, or like overly fantasizing about it, how great it is, or fantasizing about people praising you. And it's important you genuinely feel the things you're saying. Like, I trust myself, I am worthy of help, I'm worthy of good relationships, I did a good job. And saying these things in a nurturing way and not saying it in a way where you're getting an ego boost about it. Part of healing that ego is really looking at your inner child wounds and healing them one by one, which we have a ton of stuff on this channel. And the last thing is accept disappointment. You know, let go of control. So you trying to overly control things because you don't want to deal with disappointment is so unhealthy. That's something that's completely out of your control. Part of life is that you're going to be disappointed, so you need to learn how to accept no, accept rejection, and be okay with it. Understand people are going to say no to you. Sometimes they're going to disappoint you, and that's okay. You don't always have to receive yes. That does not reflect your self-worth. And come to the acceptance, because just because you rely on someone doesn't mean that they'll never disappoint you. Sometimes that will happen. We expect different things from different people. People can't always meet our expectations, and it will result in disappointment, but you can't always control not feeling hurt or not getting hurt. Like I said in my helpless video, it's important when to do things for yourself and when to ask for help. And I always say, first check in with yourself, see if you can do it. If you notice that you need help, ask for it. Don't ever be afraid to ask for it. If you need to get mental help, ask for it. If you need a friend's insight, ask for it. Don't be hesitant to ask for help, because that's how we grow and we learn and we become better people. So what do you guys think? Leave it all in the comments below, and please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and share with someone you think may need it. Until next time, thanks for watching. Bye, guys. And allow people to act. Ew. My dog is literally sleeping on one of my notes for my clients. So he's basically sleeping on my clients. What the hell am I saying?